Hello, friends, and welcome to the Weekend Catch-Up Club, the coffee morning show brought to you live every Saturday direct to Twitch and available later on demand at youtube.com/gamertagged and podcast services. Today, I am joined by our very exciting guest. It is Amandine Flachs, the CEO and co-founder of Wild Meta. Amandine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Russ. Hi, nice to be here.
I had to keep postponing. I thought, am I going to have to postpone this again with everything that was trying to scupper our plans this week? But finally, we got to get together and make this happen. So thank you for being flexible and reshuffling things around and working out the schedules.
That's completely fine. I know what it's like to have guests and to have to juggle on to make sure you have a guest and an interview for this week. So yeah, no problem at all.
It's so funny because I mentioned earlier when we were kind of emailing back and forth that I had 4 guests lined up to record for this week, which would have been ideally that's the next 4 weeks of podcasts all kind of planned and mapped out. And then through different events and circumstances, everything got cancelled. And then I'm like, oh my God, I don't have a guest for this week. But thankfully, yeah, we sorted it out and it's working out.
I'm glad we did.
I know. So, Amandine, can you please do an introduction as to who you are, what Wild Meta do, and the full description as to how accomplished you are within the gaming industry space?
Well, that's a long story, but I'll keep it short. So yes, my name is Amandine Flachs, and as you said, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wild Meta. So before I tell you more about what Wild Meta is and what we're working on, let me give you a bit of background about my own experience. So I have been working with early stage tech startups for more than 10 years. I've worked in France, where I'm from. I also worked in the USA, and I've now been in the UK for about 6-7 years already. Time flies. So what I've been doing mainly is helping very early stage team, especially in emerging technologies, and quite often led by very technical people, to help them on the non-technical aspect. So making the first marketing and communication action, building the team, starting to hire the first non-technical people, but you first need to understand what the plan is going to be, what the strategy is going to be to hire the right person to do the job. So I've been doing a lot of different things within the startup ecosystem. And I started Wild Meta in 2019. So I'm still involved in the startup scene. I am a mentor for a bunch of initiatives, especially helping underrepresented founders. I am also a VC scout for a fund based in London, investing at seed stage in Europe. So that means that I just make some introductions from time to time, and I can help founders understand the investment landscape. And I also have my series of live video AMAs with early stage founders. But that's kind of all the side things that I do. Now, okay, Wild Meta. So as I said, I started Wild Meta in 2019. And what we're doing is we are helping game developers create smarter and more human-like game AIs. So we're talking about bots, about non-playable entities, so NPCs. And so for that, we're using machine learning. So we have developed our own framework that enables us to create machine learning-based bots that learn to play specifically a game that we are training the AI on.
Wow. I mean, this is a side of the industry that isn't really highlighted much at all, and which is kind of crazy when you think about what makes or breaks a video game is most of the time it's AI. We always see things where NPCs are maybe like walking straight into a wall and they're walking on the spot or they're unresponsive, all this kind of stuff, and then you think, oh, it's just a bug, it will get fixed, it gets patched. Sometimes it does, of course, but like machine learning for smart AI just sounds so fascinating, way over my head. I'm a complete dummy by comparison for this kind of stuff. How do you even begin to I guess, explore that kind of stuff and let alone build a company around machine learning and AI for video games.
Well, you know, your reaction, I think, summarizes very much the situation where every player understand that bots are not great most of the time. So you have a few good games where they put really lots of effort into the bots and you can really feel that. And quite often these games have the AI, usually the AI of the opponent, or something very central. So they really put lots of efforts. And the thing is, today, the way these game AI are made is through scripts. So they follow certain script. There are lots of techniques, of course, you know, using nav mesh, pathfinding, lots of different techniques used, but it's basically a program, something that follows a specific script that someone wrote. And so using machine learning, the big advantage is that the character, the NPC, is going to react to its environment. It's going to learn to play a game, and then it's playing like any player would play with the rest of the players. And the idea is that the player wouldn't be even able to tell if it's a bot or a human playing. And the thing is, today there are lots of players who are a bit tired of the way no one really puts their thoughts into the bots.
Yeah.
You know, you said it yourself. They just walk in a circle, or they walk straight into a wall, and that's a problem. And you know, even just last week, I was reading an article. I think it was on The Verge. Yeah, I think so. And it was about Battlefield getting some new bots, and it was interesting because the article was written in a way that they were saying basically that people didn't want to have bots. And so even in the comment, people were very strong about that. Like, no, we don't want to have bots. And the problem is that's because people have in mind the really crappy bots we've been seeing. And so that's why they don't want it. But in the end, bots aren't a bad thing. It's just dumb bots, yes, but not bots in general. And so when you ask players about games and memorable game AIs, no one can really give many games that are not from 10 years ago. And that's a problem. So that's really what we're trying to solve. And as you say, it's something quite unusual. And yes, building a company out of it is something even harder. But how we're doing it, just by believing that this is going to arrive, you know, that's really coming. And we're early, so there aren't that many people that know what we can do. And right now, I spend a lot of time trying to think about how we can spread the word. Because if no one knows what we can do, no one can really reach out to us and say, hey, let's do something together, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about spreading the word. And the thing is, I think new technology coming to an industry is always tricky, right? Especially in video games, you have lots of established things. And the way games studios work, the way the funding works, it makes things very hard for them to just have an in-house development team, like an in-house R&D team to do research and to build the foundation and to really look into machine learning. And so I think having third parties like us who are really just specialized into one thing, we have developed the technology, so you don't have to develop your own system. And so we can just work together. And since you don't have machine learning expert in-house, we offer the service and not just the product. That's our approach, and I really believe that's a way of getting this technology into the hands of the industry and of more players in the end, because it's about also improving the players' experience.
Totally. Because there was that article that I think I saw as well about, you know, you said like people complain that you don't want bots, but it's not about not having bots, it's about having like bad bots. And I was thinking, like the last game that I played that had maybe, I don't know if I would even say a really good boss, but it was an additive to the multiplayer experience, was probably Titanfall 1, where they were trying to at the time anyway fuse the multiplayer PvP scene with that feeling of the single player campaign, and doing that, there was like the bots kind of flying in to give you like reinforcements and to fight alongside you, sort of thing, on the battlefield. But they're still regarded as fodder. You know, it's just something that is like kind of there. It's a little bit of a distraction, but you're always aware that it's not another player that's going to really challenge you, put you through your paces. But at the same time, that was a really big selling point for myself and a lot of other gamers, because they enjoyed just being able to shoot some bots as well as getting the other players as well. It constantly felt like you weren't getting destroyed on these multiplayer games and not getting any kills. It was like an additive experience. And I was thinking further back as to what were the last ones. I mean, I remember like the original Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront on the original Xbox and PS2, I think, and then Unreal Tournament and things like that. And there's been nothing for such a long time. But then I think, as you said, I think they are actually coming back. At E3 when Xbox announced Halo Infinite, they actually made a big deal about if you're maybe not ready to go into the competitive PvP against other players game modes, you can actually do like the training thing, which is bringing back boss. And myself and a few others were like, yes, we're jumping for joy, because I may very well spend all my time just playing against the boss because it's fun and I'm not going to get destroyed. But it's really interesting to see that it seems to be coming back. And it must be because they're working out, or they're working with services like yourself to do good AI, good bots that actually are challenging you but not destroying you. But at the same time, it feels like it's not just a bot that's going to jump out, stand there to let you kill them, and then you move on to like the real enemy, the real competitor.
No, definitely, and yes, and maybe the fact that so many players complained for so long about every time you see a new game, lots of comments on the Steam page or about the bots being too dumb, and maybe the game industry is listening. And also, I think the fact that you have some toxicity in some multiplayer games and in some communities, being able to play not with players, not with humans, can also be a kind of a security thing where, okay, today I don't want to face any discrimination or harassment, or I just want to play a nice game, and it's safe with bots. I mean, machine learning bots or any kind of bots are never going to insult you or to make fun of your accent or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. I was actually talking to my friend who got back into Sea of Thieves, and we were chatting about how annoying it was for him to spend maybe a couple of hours sailing the high seas, getting some treasure, trying to get it back to his base, and then it gets sunk by another player, and he has nothing to show for his time. And he was begging for like just a PvE mode where he can just go with his friends and play against the computer and still have a really good time sailing the high seas as that pirate life. But it's whenever another player that he doesn't know gets involved in the game, it becomes like this kind of griefing match, and he can't just enjoy his game. So it's really fascinating to see the rise in PvE games like Destiny, which is fully tailored to just you against the AI, and then you can squad it with your friends, and then it has a completely separate PvP mode. And then they've got things like the Gambit game mode, where it's still PvP, but you're also fighting against the AI as well, to make it more challenging and more interesting, rather than just it's like that asymmetry. It's not directly competitive against other players. You're both competing against the AI, but you're by kind of proxy, you're both fighting against each other for like a scoreboard kind of thing, rather than directly trying to kill each other. And I think that is a really fascinating introduction of game modes that are kind of trying to take the PvP experience, but not have people teabag you because they've shot you multiple times via a headshot. It's really, really like interesting.
Definitely, yes. And, games are always evolving, and there are some trends, lots of things are changing. And And so you have, for example, right now, a huge trend on games that let you create your own environment, your own ecosystem, or even your own game within the game. Thinking about the huge success of Roblox and Minecraft right now, or even Creator. I mean, these kind of games are really popular. And if you think about the bots, it's very hard to hard code a bot for these kind
Mm.
of games, because you don't know what to expect. You don't really know what the players are going to create. So that's the kind of things also, the complexity of the game we play has evolved a lot over the past few years. Now we can have more and more players in the same instance,
Yeah.
and we can do so many things and explore different type of gameplays that well, were more difficult a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that must be like the true goal, to create AI which can be spontaneous, and it's not a programmed set of procedures that it just runs through, that to make it feel so believable that you just don't know. And then like for something like Minecraft or Roblox, that's all about creation and building things.
Mm.
Whereas if an AI can create something that you didn't expect, that must be terrifying, because it becomes that kind of movie aesthetic where we've created a true AI. Is it going to become self-aware, and is it Skynet and the Terminator and stuff? But of course, we want to be getting like really smart machines to create these experiences which we can't necessarily get with other players. But it takes the griefing aspect out of it, like you mentioned.
Definitely. And it's funny, the link you make with directly with everything we've been told for years about AIs, in the movies and in TV shows and everywhere. And there are many people who actually make this link, but not as a joke, and seriously think about the threat. And I think it's important at this stage right now where we are today to try to demystify the technology and what machine learning really is. I was exchanging this week with someone really briefly on the fact that you have different ways of doing machine learning, you have different techniques, you have different industries. I mean, machine learning is a tool. It's a technology. It's a tool, and so it's not an industry on its own, right? It's just you can do so many things, and so sometimes I'm talking in panels and discussions with people also doing something with machine learning, but they have complete different challenges than we do, and so that's why right now when you think about machine learning in games, you may think about what OpenAI and DeepMind have done. And so it's a great start. And I think they have done a great job opening a door, because now when we talk to some game developers about machine learning for games, and specifically for the bots, they think about OpenAI and DeepMind and they're like, oh yeah, I've seen their work. But the problem is that because it has been for academic research, everything they've done has been to around beating humans, the
Mm.
AI against the humans. And so I remember I went to San Francisco for the OpenAI 5 finals, which was a competition on Dota 2 between OpenAI AIs and professional
Wow.
Dota 2 players. And it was so cool. It was amazing. But you know what? I was there. I was in this big room, and I knew that around me were super big fan of esports and Dota, and in the same time, some of the best machine learning researchers. And here I was, in my hand, I had two balloons to cheer either for the AI or for the humans, and
Okay.
I was like stuck, and I was like, well, okay, do I have to choose really? Like, do I have to really
Yeah.
choose that, or to cheer for the humans or for the AIs to beat the other? And that's really where we started thinking about wild meta further and decided to take things further, because there is so much more to do. It's not
Yeah.
about beating the humans. And I've played against OpenAI AI. It's great. It was really cool, but I'm not great at Dota. I'm not a huge Dota 2 player. And I lost in a few minutes. I had no idea what happened. So it's not funny. No
Yeah.
one wants that for their players. You don't want to have an AI that just beats your players and that's it. You don't want to play a game like that.
Yeah.
So it's really at that time that became kind of a mission to show that you can do more than that. That's great. That's academic research, and they definitely serve their purpose and more than that. So they've done an amazing work promoting what you can do and the technology, how far it can go today. But then it's now our job to take the next step and show that was great. Now
Yeah.
let's go to the next step and get something ready. And also also technically, just taking the technical aspect from research to actually something that fits into the studios, the main engine, and these kind of things. That's
Mm.
also a lot of work and the different type of work.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so much nuance to like machine learning. As you said, it's not just about winning. It's not just about beating the player, because where is the fun in that? It's about, I guess, giving a challenge, but making it feel fair, realistic. Does the machine need to make mistakes, kind of thing, like a player would make mistakes? It's we see it in like driving games. Like if the computer controlled car, whether in like Forza or Gran Turismo, is always going to have the racing line no matter what, then that is, it's a robot, it's controlled by the computer. It's not believable.
Yes.
Whereas I think they had that buzzword term about drive avatars or something it was. So it's supposed to learn from like the way you play the game, the way your friends play the game. It uses like cloud data, and it analyzes how you would typically take a bend or a hairpin or like X number of runs around a course to then create some kind of like bot persona that can lose it. It can spin out randomly based on you and your players' data, which is so fascinating as well. And I remember as a kid playing like Street Fighter and like the Turbo editions. It wasn't really smart learning AI at all. It was just difficult for the sake of difficulty, and they would make it so fast that you just didn't have the reflexes to be able to block or to throw the fireballs, or the computer would just automatically block everything, and you would feel so cheated.
Yes.
But it's fascinating because there's so many types of games that require so many different types of AI. So I'm going to ask you now, how do you address like X company comes to you for like help, experience? How do we implement really good AI into X type of game? Without obviously giving away the secret sauce to your company. I'm not asking you for that. But like, what is the process then to be able to partner with a developer to make good AI, but not impossible, or you feel cheated or something like that? Like that whole process must be. I'm just fascinated by it.
Well, the thing to understand is that, and it may not be obvious for everyone, but okay. So when we work with a studio, the idea is that we train the AI specifically for the game. So it's not that we have trained an AI to play this kind of game and then we just plug it into your game and that's it. There is always this thing where we actually create the AI just for your game. And then we train it to learn to play your game. And so before we get started talking further with any studio, we have to first sit down and really understand the game itself, how it works, how what the next step, the future evolution also, because we can take that in consideration. So let's say we start talking to a studio that is in its early day of development. So for us to start training the AI, we need to start having access to the game, and so we need to have at least the main mechanism and the main map in place, right? But if the game thinks about, I don't know, maybe changing a lot of things in terms of the map itself, or to add new mechanism in the coming few months or something like that, we need to know that as early as possible so we can take that into consideration. It's not impossible. it could be a bit more complex or not. It's just we have to take in consideration many things. We have to think about the platform also, where the game is going to run on, if the AI is going to be on a server or run locally on the device. And so there are many things to take in consideration that is going to affect the way we design the neural network behind the AI. So the neural network is what is going to make the decision for the character. And so, yeah, I would say our secret sauce really is that we're working with the studio, and it's a service. It's not a tool. It's like we have developed this technology that enables us to create the AI for a specific game, but then we have to work with the game depending on where they are, the stage they are at, the platform they're using, but also the technology they're using. So that's also why offering a service makes sense, because different games may have more or less complex tech stack. And so the idea is really to fit into that. We really want people to adopt this technology. And so we don't want to arrive and be like, yeah, we're using machine learning, but to have our bots, you need this and that and that, We really want to be able to work really easily with studios. And that's why we're spending so much time just having initial chat with them and understand very well how they work, the questions they have. I was talking about demystifying machine learning. And so it's important for me that studios understand or have their questions answered, and so they don't see a huge black box, but actually a small black box, and then they understand the rest and how it fits into the game. So that's the first big step. But then we can come into place at different stage of the development of the game. So we are mainly using something that is called reinforcement learning, but then we don't need to have data. We don't need the AI learns by playing the game. But then let's say your game is already available in early access, or you have done lots of testing and you have a bunch of gameplay from players. We can also use that. And so we can show that to the AI so we can learn some moves and some things, especially, let's say, for games that have some players who can adopt some techniques or strategy. And you could show that to the AI and train the AI using that too, so it can replicate some behaviors or strategy adopted by humans.
Wow. It's so interesting and so complex. I feel smarter just by listening to it, even though I don't understand most of it.
Well, and I'm not the technical part of our team, so I just try to make it simple to understand. But that's it. That's machine learning can be intimidating because it's lots of new terms, and you think about hardware and you think about the complexity, but there are more and more ways of explaining things that makes it not that complex. It's just all about understanding small steps, and there will always be some kind of black box, of what the AI is really learning and why it does what it does. But then we're monitoring everything. When we're training the AI, it's not just like we launch a program and it's training. It's not like that. We actually monitor everything. We make sure that it's learning the right things at the right pace. We are adapting how it learns things, along the way to improve it. And so we can understand many things that may look like a black box from outside perspective.
It's just so fascinating. What is the advice for, I guess, getting into the space, whether it is like graduates or students or people looking to kind of start looking at machine learning and as maybe a profession, or just starting out? Is it accessible, or is it does it require a lot of like mathematical skills, computer science skills, qualifications, that kind of thing?
Well, I think it depends what you try to do and what really interests you. So there are different level of machine learning, and today you have more and more tools that let you use machine learning without being a machine learning scientist. But then, if you want to get into the more innovative things, I know, push the boundaries of what is already out there, and there is a lot of room for that, and it's more complex. So yes, I'd definitely recommend some computer science degree, and now I think there are some specialized machine learning degrees too. But you also have a bunch of resources available online and lot of research, like the research. All the research done around machine learning and the different application of machine learning, it's very rich. There are lots of people publishing every day some very interesting things, and you also have some intermediary people who actually do lots of summary and explainer, and there are lots of content creators out there also trying to explain and give you the foundation. There are also lots of courses. I'm thinking especially I think it's the Coursera. Well, there are a bunch of courses that are very famous
Mm,
and that are very good. Happy to share a bunch of links if you want. But yeah,
yeah,
many ways. Traditional path through academic and graduating, but also just through personal learning online. You have so many things.
that's it. There's so much access now to learn
Yes.
so many different things. It's kind of wild that like anything practically you can think of, you can find something online, whether it's a series of YouTube videos or it's online courses or it's just mental what can be found to become a professional at something these days. It's
And communities
incredible.
also.
Yeah.
There are so many Slack, Discord groups of people just experimenting together, and that's fantastic to see. I love that. From people who are just doing independent research, working alongside students, or people just interested into the topic or passionate about a specific application. It's very broad, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So can we talk a little bit about your AMAs that you do? Because it's not just Amandine Flachs is not just about wild meta machine learning. You do your own podcast series as well. You do regular AMAs. And you also do, you mentioned at the beginning, you help with entrepreneurs to start their business ventures as well. So can we discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I started this series of live AMAs about 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And so initially, the concept was very different from what it is today. So the idea was that I was interviewing early stage startup founders, but the gimmick was that they used to come to my place and we used to play video games in the middle of the interview. And you know what? It worked really well. The reason why I did that was, first, it gave me an excuse to play games, because at that time I really struggled finding the time to play video games. And I wanted to, I had a
Yeah,
list of games and I thought, okay, that would be a good excuse. But also, when you interview someone, it helps to create a relationship or to have an
mm,
existing relationship. And when you don't, sometimes, especially if the people are not used to give interviews or used to be on camera,
yeah,
can be intimidating.
mm,
And so now it's different because everything is online. You have your webcam always on. It's slightly different. But 2 years ago, I was going to a lot of events, and I thought it would work really well to highlight the work of people, but online, and live, like an event, but just online. And also, I was seeing all these events interviewing very famous people, entrepreneurs who have done it 10 years ago and they had
yeah,
some success, and that's great for them. But what I wanted to hear was the people building things today, not just the people who were successful 10 years ago, because what they've learned is super valuable. But
mhm,
also, it's not just, you don't get the feeling how they're doing today. They don't really tell you about the struggle they're having right now, what they
yeah,
haven't yet figured out. And so that was my initial idea: focus on early stage founders and play video games to create a more friendly vibe, and it worked really well.
It's a good icebreaker for sure.
Yeah, and what I was doing is first talk a bit about my guest, have a bit of an introduction, then play games, and then really go into the hard questions. Deep dive into the more personal things, like
The
how did
guard's
you
down
feel
and
when
you
this
pounce
happened?
on them. Is that it? Is that the tactic?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's yeah, kind of. Let's be honest. But that was very nice and very friendly. But with COVID, I had to adapt my format. So I moved to a fully remote live AMA. So it's still live, but it's just fully remote, which also kind of gave us the opportunity to interview people outside of London. And
Yeah.
that also gave a very interesting perspective, because we weren't just talking about the London ecosystem and people just
Mm,
locally here, but
yeah.
we were able to talk to people in, I don't know, in Germany. We had someone in Singapore, so all over the world, and talking about the different approaches, the different mindsets for entrepreneurs. It was eventually a good opportunity. Also, I have to say, I think moving online, it gave me the opportunity to tweak settings and to learn more about live
Yeah.
streaming, because when people used to come to my place and we used to do these interviews in real life, the problem was it was very stressful.
Yeah.
I had the exact same time as you do, kind of the Saturday morning slots,
Yeah.
and it was very nice because it was the weekends. But for me, it was so stressful waking up early, making sure always stressing that my guests may not be able to find my flat, or may have some delays, or just don't wake up.
Yeah.
And
Or
so
the
it was
neighbors are having an argument and then you can hear them through the walls and it all gets picked up on the microphone. That's the or
exactly,
lawnmowers.
yes.
Neighbors are gardening, there's DIY going on, construction, all of this wonderful stuff.
Exactly. And also, I didn't really go too far into my webcam settings, and you can see it because you have lots of changes. So first, I was always blurry, because it's
Yeah.
I didn't invest in lots of big equipment. I invested in the sound, in the microphone, and
Yeah.
so I'm always blurry. The image, the color is always changing, because I was also relying a bit um, on the
Is that the
natural light.
auto white balance and natural light as well?
Yeah, a mix of things, and also my guests, depending on their skin color, depending on what they're wearing. So it was super interesting discussions. But if I was to do the same today,
Yeah.
again in real life, I think the quality would be very different, because I played a lot during COVID with my settings and my
Yeah.
stream, and I think that's streaming is about that. It's about always experimenting, but the real motivation, for me, is still to highlight the work of founders. And now that I am a founder, I have a different perspective. I have different questions. Um, well, even though it kind of the same questions than before, but sometimes I ask more specific questions, or I have a personal interest in knowing the answer, really.
Mm.
And it's still very interesting for me, not just to be involved in the startup ecosystem, but also to highlight these people and what they're working on, and to be able also to bounce back ideas with my guest, just from a founder to a founder, just talk more about the struggle, the reality, and
Yeah.
just trying to shine some light on that.
Yeah. Well, that's what gives your show a different perspective that other shows necessarily don't have the opportunity, because you've been through a lot of what these guests have been through by being a founder, by being an entrepreneur, by being a mentor as well, to have a different insight, to ask different types of questions rather than tell us about yourself kind of thing, which is that's kind of my bread and butter. So I maybe apologize if I'm rehashing a lot of stuff, but
No, that's good.
it's again, it's just all the times it's just being interested in your guest and let them talk as much as possible, which I usually sometimes find quite difficult because I like to talk as well, and and we like to have this kind of back and forth. So I apologize if I'm rambling too much as well, but it's so interesting and so cool to see like other podcasters, what they want to do with their own show, who they want to get on and talk to. Because a lot of times, if you're just starting a podcast, you get lost in getting like a really big name, like a really big famous person, in order to get that traction, in order to get that engagement. And then, you know, the goal ultimately being thousands and thousands of views, and then you get other big guests. But a lot of the time, I'm finding I really kind of tailored my show around the people that make the games first and foremost, that are not necessarily the big creative directors, the big kind of visual people that usually do all the press junkets and the media coverage, but like the sound engineer, the artist, the QA person, because that's people that I'm fascinated by, because they are usually kind of like overlooked in terms of the actual game development process. So I want to kind of pick their brains and find out, tell us about like what you do and how you got into that, and all of kind of really kind of delve into their experience. And you were fascinating because from the different aspect of the industry, and your experience was different again. I thought, man, Amandine just sounds so cool and so much experience and machine learning, and oh my goodness, it just sounds awesome.
And still I fit in your format, and I fit into your criteria because I still work in game. Yes. I love that. That's the thing. When you're creating content, it also gives you an excuse to reach out to some people and just learn about something. Get the opportunity to ask some questions about different things that you wouldn't have. Networking is great, but you need to have a purpose when you're networking. You need to have an excuse to deep dive into what someone does. It would be really odd to go to an event and ask, I don't know, a sound engineer some deep question about their work, and they're like, okay, so we're here to network, but yeah, a sudden interview, and so it's just a good excuse to get to know some very interesting people, and that's something I really love about that. And the gaming community is also a very nice community. It's kind of welcoming, really, and it's very tight. So you need to have some layers to get in, but then you realize you're not really in, and then you want to go further in, and in the same time, that's the kind of industry where you quickly know a lot of people, and that's amazing. I love that. It reminds me a lot when I was working in virtual reality a couple of years ago, and it was the same thing where everyone knew each other, but then the industry started growing, and so we realized, oh, you actually don't know everyone, and then you but still you're connected in some way to so many people.
That's all that stuff that you've just mentioned. That is what I find so fascinating, and it's strange because the lockdown has brought so much like worry and stress for a lot of people and their jobs and their circumstances and stuff. But I guess the flip side to that is that it has opened up certain opportunities that, like yourself and myself included, we've been able to either create a show or expand a show into like a global audience or global guests that we normally would never have had the opportunity to. And I find that kind of like really encouraging and enriching as well. And what you mentioned there about just kind of networking with people within the gaming space, is a lot of the time I just kind of rather sheepishly and brazenly just kind of ping somebody a message that I have no rapport with whatsoever. I've never met them, but I just say, hey, you sound really awesome. Do you want to be on a podcast? And I send them the link to previous guests and sometimes they won't respond, which is totally fine, because who is this Yahoo that's jumped into my DMs and messaging me this random stuff? But also a lot of the time they're so welcoming and opening, and then they'll do a little bit of research, maybe if they have the time, of course, and they'll say, yeah, this sounds really cool. Let's kind of get a date in the diary. And that for me, I thought was so incredible, because professionally I'm not directly in the gaming industry space. I come from a design and marketing background, but it's not in the games industry. But it's always been my first kind of passion, my love, my big hobby and stuff. So being able to reach out to people, and then who I think are kind of like rock stars because they make video games, and then or they're in that space, I get to talk to them. I think is just so fascinating and just like wholesome and interesting, and it's just great to be able to talk to people. And I think during this time, during lockdown and isolation and everything, the fact that we can just still talk to people is so like a wonderful gift to be able to I guess give back out there to hopefully listeners that hopefully enjoy the show.
Reaching out to people is easier since COVID because now everyone is connected in some way. You don't have, it's harder to find someone who is not connected, who is not at least on LinkedIn or answering in emails. So it's easier to reach out, but it's harder to build real relationship. And that's what I can't wait for to get back to events, just to build more meaningful relationship, because jumping on a call is nice. And I try to keep track of who I'm speaking to, make sure I add them on social media to see the name popping sometimes when they have some news, and to keep in touch without having to reach out specifically or have a reminder in some way. And so when you just have a call, it's so easy to just forget about it, about this person. You haven't really met in real life, and even if you had a great discussion, you're busy, you're getting into what you were working on before, and you're getting back to it right after the call. And so yes, you can reach out to more people, and more people are more inclined to answer, which is fantastic. But in the same time, is it strong enough to build a professional relationship? I don't know. It's a bit light. It could be. Some people are embracing it, and it could be. But sometimes you just feel that maybe if you were sharing a coffee, we're going for a walk together, or met at an event where, I don't know, maybe you would be stuck on the line for the food or for the drinks together. That would be different,
Yeah.
And also during events, you can introduce other people. So you're talking to someone, and someone else pops in, and you're like, oh, you should be talking to this person. These kind of things that don't really happen online, even if people are trying to find ways to do that. I really love something that lots of groups do, is having some kind of matchmaking. So they pair you randomly with someone from the community who is available to jump on the call. And I just love that, because it's a good just excuse to sit down with someone that you wouldn't necessarily have reached out to, or you didn't even know were on the channel or something. So I really like all these new things that people are trying to come up with to kind of recreate the serendipity you have in real life. It's great, and I really hope it's going to stick. But I think in the future it's going to be good to have a balance, be able to do more things online, meet new people online, but also from time to time, see the people, get a beer together, and really create this relationship, this friendship further.
Yeah, you're right, because it's so different and so challenging to hop on a call with somebody, whether it's a podcast or just a phone call, and try and get like instant chemistry to be able to establish a rapport and have a really good conversation. Whereas if it was over a coffee, over a drink, then the environment is so key to the way we feel about different things, the way we want to, like things we want to talk about, experiences we want to talk about. It all feeds into that. So to do it virtually is incredibly challenging. I mean, it's difficult to not come off like a stalker or something when because you have to usually research your guest if you don't know them, and then it's like, oh yeah, I know all of this stuff about you, and then they're maybe immediately on the defensive. It's like, oh my god, what have they seen? What have they been looking at of mine? What have I been tweeting about that they're going to hit me with, or something like that?
Well, if it's public, you have to go with it. I mean,
it's true.
You made it public.
True. I know. So I really do hope, that we can hold on to the strong connections that we've made virtually. But that in-person stuff is so hugely important. I don't think we're ever going to really lose that. But if it is a connection with somebody who is across the world, then that's more challenging to try and retain that relationship as well. And maybe it does need a little bit extra nurturing and just constantly reaching out to not necessarily like collaborate or quote unquote like get something from them to create a piece of content, but just to kind of have a check-in. Hey, do you want to maybe collaborate on something, or do you want to just chat about something? Have a Friday beer or pizza hour or something. I don't know. It could be random. It could be, whatever it takes to just kind of try and, nurture that relationship.
Yes, definitely. And that's where I see platform like LinkedIn. I know it's not the perfect platform, definitely, but I really like the fact that it's a way of knowing what people are up to, without necessarily, or sometimes it gives you an excuse or reminder that you haven't spoken to this person for a long time. So if someone mentioned that they just changed job, for example, rather than just saying, congrats, or the pre-written sentence that LinkedIn offer you, you could put a reminder or think, okay, next week I need to reach out to this person to know what's up with their new job. And these kind of things where I find social media very useful. I may be spending too much time on social media, especially Twitter. I think Twitter is my main thing. Maybe too much time for sure, but it's also great sometimes to just be able to exchange on a topic with someone from the other side of the world, and you're just on the same page, and you're just exchanging ideas through social media, and then that can definitely lead to some real relationship over time.
Yeah, that's true. It's when you look at your profile and you see how many lifetime tweets that you've sent since joining Twitter that you think, oh God, I should probably take a break from Twitter for a little while. But no, you're right. LinkedIn is really interesting because it is supposed to be the more formal, business oriented social media platform, but it is kind of blending a little bit. I think more and more people are beginning to share more kind of personal stuff on there.
Yes.
The only kind of stuff I really share is more kind of hobby based, so it's still kind of like professional-ish, but it's more like on like projects I may be working on in my spare time. So it's got that kind of like technology, maybe collaboration kind of vibe to it, or it could be like, this is a work in progress piece of design that I was working on. And you maybe just kind of put that out there as a case study. So that's kind of really interesting ways to collaborate with other creatives or other industry people to say, hey, I just did this really quick. It was a case study. What did you think? And get kind of engagement that way. And that can kind of spark conversations. But again, it's like having conversations on social media platforms is so difficult as well. And you'll always get the random keyboard warriors coming in as well that will give their 2 cents. And it's like butting into a conversation that you're maybe having privately in person, and then some random stranger kind of just I overheard that and let me tell you what I think, kind of thing. So it's so much of a minefield, but it can be hugely rewarding as well.
Yes, it is. To be honest, what I've been doing with my social media for many years is treat them as if it was a company, as if I was representing a brand or something else that is just not me, So yes, it's personal, and sometimes I tweet about some personal things, but not too personal. Like I'm not going to be crazy and using it as a journal or something. It's still. Sometimes it's personal. It's especially on Twitter. Sometimes I share about my side project. Also, sometimes I share some things I do on the weekend. Like when I get some crazy ideas on Friday, and then I spend the entire weekend getting into a new tool because I want to do something specific. This kind of crazy things.
Yeah.
But it's still professional. It's like I have some kind of layer. I have something that every time I want to tweet something or share something on LinkedIn, I always think automatically about how it could be perceived. Could it be seen as something offensive? Like, for example, jokes. I'm French, and sometimes, we are a bit sarcastic. And so, sarcasm on Twitter doesn't really work well. So I try to avoid. And every time I'm tempted to do a joke, I'm like, maybe not. And so I
How would this
always
be received, kind of thing? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I have done that for all my social media for many years now. And now it's like a reflex. It's automatic for me to think about that. And so I guess I am more careful on social media that some people who will just use it with no filter. And I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
well, now it's more and more people understand that, and the young generation has been always using social media, so I think that they may be getting it even more. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why the Scots and the French get on so well, is because we both have such a sarcastic sense of humor that it can be very, very blunt or very, very frank. So
Yes.
it kind of translates quite well there. But yeah, you don't know who's watching or who could read it just the wrong way, or because there's no tone to it other than the written tone, but that doesn't translate at all over like text or anything like that. So yeah, it's context and the way in which it would be said is everything, which doesn't carry across over social media.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
But also, I try to use social media to give some exposure to everything I do. So, as the CEO of Meta, I am kind of the face of the company, and I am the one who goes to speak at all the events and do all the business development. My co-founder is going to speak also to a few events, but it's mainly me. So also when you're presenting a company or other people, you have also to think about that. You can't just be like, when I have my CEO hat, I'm nice and smiling and everything, and then I'm going to tweet some very dark stuff. Like, you can't do that. You only want one presence, and that's who you are online. And the difficulty is to show the different part of yourself. And so I try to not to be like just tweeting about my company and that's it. I actually don't tweet that much about it from time to time, but it's very subtle. But I'm going to promote the live AMAs and to share the highlight videos and also to talk about side project and other stuff. And so it's all about showing the different things that you do and why you're doing it and what interests you. But it's interesting because the way you're using social media, it's kind of the message you want to spread to the world, and so it can be very useful for some people. Not that they have to use social media, but if they are using social media, it can be a powerful tool to show what you're interested in, and so it can lead to some people putting you in the right box in the head and then making the right introduction. It happened to me many times where I remember when I was working in virtual reality, I wanted to move into the blockchain space. It was years ago, before it was so hot and trendy. And so before I made the move, I started tweeting more about blockchain technologies, not necessarily crypto and the crypto asset, but really the technology, the blockchain technology and the applications. Right. And then some friends picked it up and were like, oh, you know what? I've just met this project. I know them. I know the guy for a while, and they may be hiring for someone right now. Do you want me to make an intro? And that was someone I knew from virtual reality. And, this person helped me out make the jump from one industry to another. And what really helped is that in her mind, I moved from being a VR specialist into being someone who has lots of experience in virtual reality, but who also has different interests in other emerging technologies. And so that changes everything, and it takes time. I mean, it takes a lot of time to change the way people see you. When I started Wild Meta, I had to really put myself in a different mindset, see myself as an entrepreneur, but also try to get other people to see myself not as an independent consultant as before, but now as an entrepreneur. And, lots of people thought that my company was just about making my consulting into a company, and it's not. It's something very different. And so I had to spend some time to step by step change how people see me and just clarify every time, no, I'm the CEO and co-founder of this company, and this is what we do. Very different from what I was doing before.
That's super fascinating. 'Cause I wanted to ask you, how difficult was it for your own mindset to change from, this is my specialty, this I consult in this, I'm accomplished in this, I'm very good at this, but then you have to switch something in yourself to be a entrepreneur and a CEO, to go from rather just somebody who is like a worker at this thing that you're accomplished at, to then be like a leader at a higher level that is somebody who actually builds companies now and then becomes a mentor for other people to build companies. You're kind of like leaving one thing behind, but not really, to then create something that a company from scratch. So it's like an internal conversion has to go on, I would imagine.
It does, but I also have an advantage is that because I've worked all my life with entrepreneurs, I knew what to expect. And before starting Wild Meta, lots of people ask me, when are you going to start your own startup? And every time I told them, I don't want to become an entrepreneur just to call myself an entrepreneur. If I was to start a business, I would do it with the right person and to do something that I really believe in. And so I've met my co-founder 7 years ago, seven, more than that now. And so we've always been brainstorming ideas, and so it's a long process. It's not like one day I decided to start a company and that's it. It didn't happen like that. I know that some founders have this kind of story, but it's not mine. And so I have this big advantage that I saw other early stage founders falling into some pitfalls, or just face some challenges. And so I knew what to expect, but in some way, it's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because I am more prepared and I don't have this kind of this belief where, yeah, I'm going to start a company and we're going to be our own boss and we are going to make this weird, crazy prediction and everything. So I knew what I was going into. But in the same time, knowing these challenges sometimes can make me a bit too worried or a bit too realistic, a bit too down to the ground, maybe. For example, for funding, at some point we were pitching to investors, and then we actually pivoted the business model and decided not to start raising funding. But also, I know that for what we do is just crazy. I mean, no one is going to try to bootstrap a machine learning startup. I mean, who's going to do that? You need resources. You need compute power. You need to hire specialists. And I'm glad that my co-founder is amazing because he can do so much on his own. I mean, it's just crazy. But no one will really do that realistically. And so because I have experience, I understand venture capital. I think it kind of push us to continue to bootstrap because we know what to expect, and we know that we need more to be able to have a better relationship and attract better VCs. And so yeah, it's an advantage, but in the same time, I'll make some choices that may not be the most usual choice, maybe. But it's I'm not sure if I really had a big switch in my head because I wasn't a big specialist. Like, some people have done one thing for many years, say marketing or
Yeah.
business development, and then you start your business and you realize you have to do a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Because what I've done before has been not well defined. When I was joining startups, depending on what they needed to be done, I was coming on board to help on a specific project or on a wider project where it's just bring the company from A to B. And so you have one job that is more specific, but you're involved in discussions that are way much wider. And so now, as a CEO, yes, one day I am the CFO, the next day I am doing business development and reaching out to as many people as possible, trying to talk to studios.
Yeah.
Another day I'm more into community and really talking to involved in lots of communities. And some days I am in charge of the IT, and also like managing our emails and creating the website. Some days I'm a web designer. And the thing is, all my life, when I had to work on a different project, I don't just think about what my skills are. I actually think about what needs to be done, and then if I don't know how to do it, I just learn to do it. Or I try to find other ways to find other people to help us. But usually the first thing I do is what needs to be done and how can I just learn to do that?
Yeah.
So that's a really helpful approach. But sometimes you also reach your limit. And so when you're a founder now, I find the difficult part is to take a step back. You know all those things. You have seen other founders face some challenges. You have seen other founders do this and that, and so you want to apply the same, but in the same time you need to take a step back from the day to day, from what you do, and that's hard. That's something difficult. For example, when I started working on our new website, so as I said, we pivoted the business from B2C to B2B earlier this year, and so one of the first thing was for us to change our approach, the way we explain what we do, to validate new assumptions, and also to have a new website. So I created the first page, but that wasn't really good. I mean, it was accurate, but it didn't speak to everyone because we didn't talk to enough studios and enough game developers. And then for months, we spent lots of time talking to studios, and we reached a point where I was embarrassed almost by this page. As I said, it was accurate. That's okay, but I knew that the message wasn't right. And so when I started reworking on the message, I knew that there were different points to really talk about. We needed to focus on the benefits, on how we're working really with studios, and clarify some things. But in the same time, because you're building a technology, as a founder, you're so close to what you're building that you just want to talk about the features. You want to talk about how it's cool, why it's cool, and you want to talk about your tech. Or maybe it's just me because I'm a big techie in the end. I don't know, but you want to talk about what excites you, but it's not for you. The website is for your clients, people you want to talk to.
Yeah.
And so trying to do that, this approach is easier when you're joining a company that is having this problem, and you are from an external point of view. And you can say to the founder, okay, you need to take a step back. Let's do that together. And let me ask you the right questions. And so we just write it down on paper. And, we have this process where you have someone else leading the thought process. And so when you're building your own company and you're now just driving the boat, it's hard to do that. And you can do that by talking to external people for sure, or having your co-founder around. But it's kind of a mental gymnastic, and it's very hard to take a step back because that's your business. I mean, everything anyone can ever know about what you do. So trying to think about it in a different way, what makes people tick. You really have to be actively listening and to put yourself in this different mindset, but it's very hard. And without even realizing it, you're back into it, and you're back too close to it again. And so you spend a few weeks, and then you realize, crap, I need to do that, and I need again to step back. That's for me. That's one of the hard parts.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's super impressive what you've achieved and what you have created with everything that you've got going on. So, Amandine, thank you for taking the time to join me for this episode of the Weekend Catch Up Club. If anybody wants to reach out and contact you about anything that we have discussed today, whether it is Wild Meta, whether it is being part of your AMAs, or just seeking some advice and help, where can they get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is Twitter. It's always, so I'm easy to find everywhere because it's my first name, my last name. I don't have anyone with the same first name and last name. So if you get the autograph right, you should find me. But I'd say Twitter is the best place. My DM are open, and I am always reactive there. If someone wants to connect and have a chat further, or connect on LinkedIn also, but be sure to add a message. Don't just add me and say nothing, just so I have some context and I can accept you. And otherwise, my email is just amandine@wildmeta.com. If you want to talk about games or anything, and if you prefer email, I mean, I'm reactive a bit everywhere, but not on Instagram. No, Instagram, I'm not good at it. But the other social media or email, I'm always quite reactive. So just reach out.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you for your time, Amandine. It's been absolutely a pleasure talking to you. And ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you have found this episode of the Weekend Catch-Up Club super interesting, fascinating, useful, insightful. I will be back next week with another fantastic guest. Do be sure to give the channel a like and a follow. Tell your friends about it, and we will be back next week. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.